The biggest challenge here is when we think of what we're trying to tell, the story we're trying to tell, it's usually always framed through our lens, and that's natural, right? It's what do we have to say? What benefit do we get from it? But that's a lot of we, me. It's a lot of self-service focus, right? So we really have to reframe this. If it's media first, it means that it's really media first.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Watts, and we're talking about what it means to do media first PR in the age of artificial intelligence. Brandon is the director of PR and communications at Storyblock. He has 20 plus years of experience in shaping the narratives of tech companies from startups to enterprises with millions of users. As a former journalist and contributor to Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Adweek, and more, Brandon understands both sides of the media landscape. With that, Brandon, welcome to On Top of PR.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. Glad you're here. I'm glad our audience is tuning in. And today we're talking about 5 different items: getting comfortable with quality over quantity, prioritizing the audience over your agenda, third, using more exclusives. Fourth, being flexible on timing. And fifth, pitching stories that are original and can only come from you versus something generated by artificial intelligence. Brandon, does that sound like a good topic for us today?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So happy to dive in.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's talk about getting comfortable with quality over quantity. I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I'll let you guide us.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the end of the year as we record this. It's everyone's starting to revise their plans for next year, what that's going to look like. And, as a PR leader myself, thinking about what the media landscape is right now and how do we really serve a media first strategy, and what does that look like? And, I think a lot of leaders will say, oh, we want good quality coverage. The quantity doesn't matter. But when you push it down to it, yourself and your leadership is tending to look at number of hits. But what I've seen, and what many of us have seen, is that quantity of hits is less valuable today than it used to be. Some can argue in ways it does support AI search. That's one bucket. We won't talk about that for right now. But the idea of what I'm seeing at press coverage at scale has just basically been rewrites, copy and paste of press releases, no additional reporting, just getting it out the door. And that metric of overall share of voice, while it's good to track, I think we're at a time now where we really have to look at depth of coverage. So that's where it comes into, what is the quality of this? Is it literally a copy and paste of a press release that's on my website, or is there anything original here? Am I giving the media an opportunity to actually own this story, shape it, spend time with it? And some of the other points we'll talk about all connect to this, but you first have to get comfortable by saying, I'm not just looking at that share of voice percentage overall where I'm the loudest voice. I want to be the smartest voice. And what does that mean? It means better quality coverage. And really, if you focus that on your agenda, I mean, that's something the media can get behind a lot more than you just shouting at them constantly to try to publish something everyone else is publishing.
Yep, Brandon, those are good points. Just for clarity, we are recording this in November 24th of 2025, and this will probably air in early 2026. So I do sense that this topic will still be extremely timely, especially as companies, I sense, are really, putting dollars behind their interest in doing what we coined AI relations, right? Or optimizing their content for AI. And, we kind of talked around a little bit of the muckrack research that supports that 95% of all AI citations come from PR type content, which is exciting for our profession and gives us a great opportunity. But, I think to your first point, right, getting comfortable with quality over quantity, that could mean many different things and in many different ways, right? So you're talking about quality of the coverage and quality of the visibility versus the volume of visibility that exists out there. And I think that, we as a profession have made a lot of strides in improving the way we measure PR and the way we look at measuring PR. There's still a lot more work to be done in this space, but I'm happy seeing those progress. And like you said, we've gotten away from, what do you call it? AVEs. We've gotten away from impressions. And I think we're slowly getting away from share of voice, although it doesn't surprise me occasionally to go to a conference or something and see somebody from a well-known brand name get up and start talking about AVEs and impressions in their presentation. And in some environments, I understand you might still have some legacy individuals on your team who they feel like that's the way you've got to report. But for the most part, I think we're doing a good job of getting away from that. What are you seeing, Brandon?
Yeah, no, similar. I mean, I think this is kind of the renaissance for PR reporting and figuring out the impact. There's so many different ways to do that, even with AI now, that can help us to narrow in on certain figures that we can fully understand and explain. But the thing that really brought me to this conclusion, again, it's nothing new, but it's this pivot point of anytime you're planning for the year, and this airing in January, you have the whole year ahead of you. So those plans are still firming up. The thing that I realize, and I know colleagues that I talk with in the industry, you get coverage, but is it coverage do you feel like you can really fully sales enable? Like, is it something that just pops up on social, or is it something that's a little deeper that doesn't just look like your press release, repurposed to hit an editorial standard? I kind of hit that wall where I was thinking, there's too much of the same thing. It's too much of the repeat messaging. There needs to be a little more depth, something that gives us mileage out of this coverage. So trying to come up with metrics that are more on, key message pull through, originality. Those are some new things that I think that PR teams would be very smart to start implementing, is that originality. Because if you're not careful, your coverage can all look the same and it starts to just be noise, frankly. And so I'm trying to make 2026 the year where it's really less, but deeper and original reporting that we can be proud of.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you. That's very helpful information. Appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk now about prioritizing the audience over your agenda. How would you advise companies to consider how they go about best doing that? How do you prioritize the audience over your agenda? Perhaps the agenda is being issued to you either by yourself and your own leadership and vision, or perhaps it's coming from a third party like your boss or the CEO or the leadership team within the organization. Yeah.
So the biggest challenge here is when we think of what we're trying to tell, the story we're trying to tell, it's usually always framed through our lens, and that's natural, right? It's what do we have to say? What benefit do we get from it? But that's a lot of we, me. It's a lot of self-service focus, right? So we really have to reframe this. If it's media first, it means that it's really media first. What are our key outlets saying? What are they talking about? But more importantly, what does their audience care about the most? Sometimes the publications lag a little bit behind the audience. So if you can really figure out what is top of mind through the audience, whether it's social media listening, things like Reddit, you can kind of get a quicker view on where the conversation is going and can pitch stories related to that. And there's always a way. If a story is promotional, let's say you have a funding round or some sort of C-level appointment or something along those lines, just the typical corporate stuff, you can easily make that about yourself. Or for instance, in the case of a C-level appointment, what experience have they had in the role that other companies can benefit from? How do you lean into that versus, hey, we just got this new person? So there's ways to make it more personal and targeted. And I think I still see so many agencies, internal teams, you read this messaging and there's nothing new there. There's nothing that really helps anyone beyond the company itself. And certainly nothing that's not too self-promotional. And it's hard. And I know we can't always win those battles. Sometimes we don't get approval for them. I know, throughout my entire career, I've tried to fight that fight and sometimes you don't always win. But in the pitching and in some of the behind the scenes direct communication, there's always ways to add a little extra spice to that to make it more palatable. Even if you can't go hard on audience first with your announcement for whatever reason, that communication with your pitch is so critical because that's really what helps you to sell it, to make it more broad in terms of who's going to want to listen to that and why.
Brandon, that's a great point. And the way I advise companies and clients is really to focus on how does this help the audience at the end of the day? Because if you help the audience, then they're going to respect you and get to know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. But if you're just shouting selfish and self-serving messages, then they're going to ignore you. And I think the best filter for this is always the media themselves. So if they're not interested in your story because it's so self-serving, they're definitely not going to go and tell it to the audience. So I always think that, if you're not getting past the gatekeeper of the reporter or the editor, there's probably a good reason for that. And that's where you need to go back and adjust your message. I used to have this at my desk. I don't have it in front of me right now, but this list of, does it make the job easier for the person we're talking to? Does it make their life better? Does it improve their financial situation? Does it give more time back to their day? And those are just quick ways to kind of think through, is this truly and genuinely helpful for the audience, or is it just helpful to us that the audience knows about a new product, a new service, a new feature that we might have, or that we've expanded into a new marketplace? So yeah, I think that, being audience focused in your writing and in your communication, even putting your audience as the subject of your sentences, I think will go a lot further than people realize. But yet I see so many marketing and communications departments doing the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, great points.
Yeah. So the next point is talking about using more exclusives. And, it's interesting because I see some LinkedIn rants about exclusives online. I think everybody likes them when they work out great and they work out mutually beneficial. I do think a lot of people misunderstand exclusives, including one time I saw a reporter ranting about an exclusive that she got. And I asked her, I said, just kind of very politely in the comments, I said, I'm wondering if you're thinking of an advance, you're describing an advance that they gave you as an exclusive. And I just kind of politely said, is there a chance that they were thinking in advance and you were thinking exclusive? And that's what caused the confusion. So I feel like, it's just like when business people ask or think that a conversation is off the record. One, we both know it's not always, it's not off the record if you don't say so. And two, you're just better off not being off the record at all, right? And I feel like kind of the same thing with exclusives and advances. I think there's a lot of confusion, but I do think that there is a unique way to go about doing that. In fact, we're in the thick of a couple of exclusives right now that we're pitching on behalf of clients. So, Brandon, I'm excited to talk about this a little bit more with you. Tell me more about kind of your thought of the benefits of using more exclusives.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear after I answer this how you're approaching this, because I'd love to learn the approach that's working for you all. But I think here's where it is. You've listened to every survey. You can cite Muckrack or Cision or the others that interview journalists, and what I think the number is something like 80% of journalists would prefer or pay more attention to a story if it's an exclusive. And I think a lot of times that just kind of glazes over our eyes. It's like, no, we can't believe that, or that's not going to work for us. And I think we have to start listening to what they say. And media first means media first. Picking an outlet and giving them a crack at it. What I'm noticing with our team and with the agencies that we work with through Storyblock is embargoes used to be kind of a fair way to do this and give multiple audiences of, sneak peek and coordinate publishing and all of that. We've all done those for years. But what we're starting to notice is reporters don't really care about the embargo as much anymore. They'll agree to it, but they won't publish when the embargo lifts. We'll have coverage come in days, weeks after. That has been a unique change in the media environment that I'm seeing. I'm curious if you're seeing that with embargoes, but unless it's a huge news event where everyone has to publish at the same time, I know some of our embargo news may not be to that level, but it's still something you want to give more of a heads up on. So there's less of an urgency with certain stories these days than there used to be. And my whole recalibration on this is giving one outlet what they ask for, what they want, that opportunity to really go deep on it, to know they're the only ones that are pursuing it first. Yes, we may spread the news wider after their coverage, but they are the first to get full time to explore it, be the first ones to publish, and really deeply understand it. So I'm curious for you, Jason, how the embargo versus exclusive approach, have you seen that change in recent years? Do you favor one over the other? There's a lot of trust you're putting in that exclusive if you're up against a timeline and hoping that they actually follow through. So there's pluses and minuses, but I think we have to get more comfortable saying, let's pick an outlet, let's make it happen. Let's make a short list of maybe 3 to 5 outlets, lock in the exclusive and make that be the thing. What do you think on that?
Yeah, it's funny as you were talking, I'm thinking of all the exclusive advances and embargoes that we've given over the years that have gone wrong because somebody somewhere, leaked the story to the wrong, was doing without, the PR firm and the client are lockstep. And then a couple of the third parties that happen to know something are like, oh yeah, I should probably tell this reporter that's a friend of mine that this is happening, and completely circumvents the process and the strategy that, the agency and the the brand have put together out there. So I was having a little PTSD, to be honest with you, while we were talking about it. But in the episode notes, we will insert links to resources of content that I've written or our firm has written on these topics in the past. But it's interesting because you said something there that I thought about for a second, which is, the sense of urgency. And I agree with you. I think it just depends on how newsworthy the topic is, right? If it's more evergreen, or it's not breaking news, or it's not involving a brand, like a Coca-Cola, a Nike, a Tesla, or a Disney that, has dedicated beat writers, then of course, it might take a little bit of time for that story to be told. I think part of the other challenge again is, if you're offering an exclusive, the rookie mistake I see people make is they're not communicating their expectations of when they want the media outlet to agree that, yes, we will cover this or not. And by what date do they need to hear that from? And then by what date do they want it published by? Because you could throw it out there and say, let's say you offer, I'm just making this up, Forbes an exclusive, and, then you don't hear back from them. And they're thinking maybe they still have the exclusive, and you're thinking, oh, I guess they're not going to do anything because there was no timeline communicated properly. So I see that as like kind of a rookie mistake. Yep. And then, to your point with embargoes, we've done that before and, clarified the date that, the date that they can start covering it, which I think everybody appreciates, especially like you said, if it's a short notice, like you can give them notice, but it's going to take them more time to report on the topic. And then, kind of an advance and embargo are kind of very similar. I think it's best to use either the term embargo or exclusive to make sure it's understood. But to your point and my point, I think if you're telling somebody you're giving them an exclusive, then it really does need to be exactly that. Now, you could tell them you're the only news outlet that we're giving this to. I'm just making this up, that within the industry, or, you're the exclusive podcast, you're the exclusive TV show or something like that, so that you can kind of play with multiple, media outlets, but, don't call it an exclusive and say, I'm giving this to the local TV network affiliate and the one across town, right? There's nothing exclusive about that. So I think it's really important that you make it clear, the timeline, the expectations, and everything's done with transparency and done in an ethical way. Otherwise, you will really burn that bridge. And I've heard of, PR people who tell somebody it's exclusive, but they're not really genuine about that. And I promise you, your reputation will spread in the wrong way like wildfire over that. So did I answer your question on that?
Yeah, you did. You did. I think and your point about timing is so important. Sometimes PR people, we're so hesitant to offend the journalists. Yeah. And obviously it's a very delicate relationship. We understand that, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I need a response by this date or this time with the time zone. If you, especially if you're giving an exclusive, this is literally a gift to them in a way. I mean, we view it as a gift. They view it as another story, but we're giving them first right of refusal. So if you're doing that, you don't want to sit by your email thinking, oh, do I have to wait 2 weeks for them to respond? I mean, it's totally realistic to say by Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Otherwise, I'll have to move this around. They understand that. No one's going to be offended by that. And the other thing I will say on this is it's not a one size fits all. Obviously, I'm not saying you pitch exclusives to everyone. This is what makes PR fun, is if you view each story as an individual campaign. Is this something we do as an embargo, an exclusive, or even just after it comes out? The cases are always different, and you never want to put one size fits all on it. So, but I think if we're thinking about media first PR and what this involves, these things need to be increased more than they typically are. So more exclusives versus less.
Yes, Brandon. So first of all, you're hitting the nail on the head by mentioning that you should also include the time zone, because we don't know where these reporters are based anymore. Gone are the days of the traditional environment, where they're working, in the same city, whether it's remote or in the office for the outlet where it's based. That's becoming more and more the exception than the norm. So that's an excellent point. And I think we're both connected on LinkedIn to a journalist who I saw recently post about this, just saying like, hey, I really love it when I get an exclusive, but make sure you don't omit or bury in the exclusive when you need to hear from me by, because it's not just me. I've got an editor I've got to take that same story to, and I may not have access to that editor as quickly as you think. So the guideline they were saying was give us 2 or 3 business days to let you know if we are accepting the exclusive or not. And there's no point in holding on to it if we're not accepting it. Just make sure you follow up with me. I mean, they just said it this way: follow up with me enough so that I remember to get back to you with a yes or no. And I thought that was appropriate too. So I think in summary, as I recall, they were saying not only give me a deadline, but then also follow up with me about a day before that deadline so I don't forget and leave you hanging. And please know that I'm not the only one who can accept it. The other thing I wrote down while you were talking is I think we miss it as, media relations practitioners. We miss the thought of, I may not be able to offer outlet B the same exclusive I gave to outlet A, but I could give them exclusive access to a particular expert or spokesperson within our organization that's not speaking to anyone else in advance of their story. I could also open up additional angles to them that I'm not specializing or maybe even key messages or topics that I'm not exploring with the other outlets. So there's creative ways to go about that. And, that's something we mentioned earlier. We're doing a couple of things like that right now where we're specifically looking at and saying, okay, with this outlet, we want to talk about, details of how the funding came to be and how the partners came together or the players came together in this partnership, as opposed to, maybe we don't address that and we focus on the tech, with this other company. So there's always different angles that you can play up. And I think the secret is, like you said, to have good planning, to communicate those expectations well and establish a timeline and just make sure kind of everybody's on the same page so no one's making assumptions or gets disappointed.
That's it.
Yeah. Speaking of, let's talk about being flexible on timing. Brandon, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, this ties in with the previous point. So if you're using exclusives and you're going media first, again, what happens, we all know this, when you're drafting an announcement, you say, okay, let's do it, January 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern, and that's going to be the date. And then let's find the media to cover it or to respect that. And I just think we've got to get a little bit out of that mindset. There's always going to be announcements that have to come out at a certain time and day. But I think if you can generate more story ideas and view them as these individual nuggets that you can place in different places, that gives you more opportunity to be flexible. So as much as is possible with stories that don't have a time crunch, instead of just saying, hey, this story is coming out, in 2 weeks, work with the journalists on the timing. What's their availability? They're probably at a conference. They're barraged with who knows what. I think that extra level of respect too. You don't want this to get delayed for months and weeks, of course, but realistically, can you be flexible on when this comes out and when they're available to meet with you on it? I've had good results doing that. I think it's just way more collaborative. And when you come to someone and say, here's the idea, it's just for you. What timing works where you're going to be able to actually dig into this versus, hey, it's coming out in a week and you have to talk to them before then. And that's kind of do or die. And again, it gets back to this idea of I'd rather have one deeply researched and informative piece of coverage than 6 or 7 that all look alike. That's just me, because I've been facing that a lot with a lot of the press releases we have. And the way media has, frankly, because of a lack of resources, they've kind of had to just churn out things and do less reporting and do more copying and pasting. And I want coverage that's deeper that I can present through the entire team, through our sales team. And so working on this exclusive approach, being flexible with timing, that is a great entryway to get that coverage that's going to benefit you. And who cares, frankly, if it comes out, a few days later or a week later. If it doesn't really matter, get the best story you can get and let that be your jumping off point for the rest of it. You're going to be much happier, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Just like in real estate, right? The cliche of location, 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 and in advertising, PR, et cetera, it's being there over and over again and again. So, it's all about, placement, if you will. So, and ongoing visibility. So, I don't know if you want to be in all the places on one day or have it trickle down. I think it depends on kind of the campaign that you're working on. But what you were saying earlier, Brandon, really comes back to me is, I say this all the time. It's important we put relationships back in public relations, right? And what you're describing is having a good relationship with the reporter or editor or producer. I'm sorry, before you start, just kind of, I don't want to say mandating, but directing their coverage, right? And instead you say, hey, I'd like to collaborate with you on a story. Now, it's helpful, one, if you already have that relationship in place. And I tell people all the time, the best best newsroom relationships come from pitching a really good story. So I could pitch a reporter I've never met before, but if I've got a great story that fits their coverage area and it's newsworthy, then they're going to like me really quickly, versus I could, be the best man in somebody's wedding. And if my story doesn't align with what they cover, they're not likely to help me out or go out of their way to risk their reputation, their employment, and the reputation of the outlet they work for. But I think it comes down to good relationships and good communication, right? Communicating about expectations, being open to collaborating on what's in it for them and what's in it for you, and how, you can align those interests. And for our audience that aren't involved in the practice of media relations, I think they're often surprised that, reporters have to cover stories, A, they're not interested in at times, and B, they have a covenant or an agreement with the audience of that outlet that they're going to cover it in a way that's helpful and interesting to them, not just what, people think the reporter wants to write about. So I think that's really important. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
The fifth thing we wanted to cover today is pitching stories that are original and can only come from you versus something generated by artificial intelligence. And I'm excited about your hot take on this, because I think a lot of people are really focused on just generating content from AI because they can. And that goes back to our earlier point as well, about quality over quantity.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do we need to hear or see journalists that are complaining about the AI pitches they're getting? And they can tell, we can all tell. I'm sure in your inbox too, Jason. I know in my inbox, it's not PR pitches, but it's sales pitches. And it's things that have gotten so much more transparent as AI, where they're like, hey, I like to go to this restaurant when I'm in your area. It's like, you've never been here. It's fake. It's fake personalization. It's not true. And it's just becoming so obvious. And so the sales tricks are being applied to journalists now by PR pros. Frankly, a lot of the PR platforms and the tooling lets you write with AI or edit with AI at scale. And if you're not human in the loop in that, you are really in trouble. And it's been entertaining to see some of the journalists that I know you and I both follow on LinkedIn talk about this and talk about some of the habits and wording, in the age of, and that's a dead giveaway right there. But there's a lot of them. But the biggest thing is I'm seeing the media complain about this thought leadership that's not thought leadership. So frankly, all of us can go to ChatGPT and say, write me a thought leadership article about enterprise SaaS and the price reductions that are inevitable, or whatever the topic is, and everyone's going to get the same or similar points that have no personal context, no actual experience, but is basically this hallucination of a bunch of different general ideas that are being pitched. And you see this in contributed articles where someone says, write me 1,000 words about whatever, or it's pitches, write me 200 words about this topic, this trending topic. And the thing is, you have to create the stories that AI can't. And that's all of that is due to your personal experience, what your company is experiencing, what your team is experiencing, your customers, lived experiences that cannot be hallucinated, that cannot be made up. I think that's the authenticity. We've always said it's important in storytelling and media relations, but for 2026, I mean, come on, that is where it lives and dies. Is this a real story that someone experienced, that is human, that is relatable, that is honest, that's not perfect, that has ups and downs? There's so many pieces of that, of what makes a good story, that I think the bar is so high that we have to, as PR pros, go through our spokespeople and our teams and really pull the human experiences out of them, because, industry platitudes just are not going to work anymore. They did work for a while, but we've run out of that time. The bar is so much higher now, thanks to AI. And I think that's a good thing, frankly. It pushes you and it makes you come to a better story in the end. So there's my hottish take on that one, Jason.
Brandon, I appreciate that. I think you're exactly right. What I'm seeing, first, I've been speaking about AI to PR communities and conferences and things like that, in a meaningful way since 2023. I certainly wasn't the first. I've got somebody on an episode recently where I was like, you were the first guy I ever knew that was talking about AI, and you've been doing it for 10 years, and now it's here and it's everything you said it was going to be. And I got to be honest, occasionally we thought you were a little obsessed with it, but you were right, And so I asked him on the interview, we'll put a link to it in the episode notes. How does it feel to be right? But at the end of the day, since 2023, and I've been talking about this, I used to say the cliche, and I think everybody's heard it by now, but garbage in, garbage out, right? So you put bad input into a generative AI app, you're going to get bad output from it as well. And so I see where, yes, people are using AI poorly and you can pick it out right away. But I think as time goes on, people are going to become more sophisticated users of it and give better prompts and better training, creating custom GPTs. And so I feel really good about where we are with this right now for our clients. But it comes from, getting real input from them and then documenting it and using AI as a collaborator, not the person, not the only, engine producing that content. So it's a great beginning, but a terrible ending. It's a great first draft, a terrible, final draft. But as things get better, I think we'll see an ongoing evolution. I also think a lot of the cues a lot of clues we can use towards AI and whether or not it's AI generated, like the M- are often kind of false alarms. And, a lot of times in my personal writing, I'm talking about, in the AI era, because I'm trying to establish, a baseline between what you could do, like you're doing right now, what you could do before AI, what you could do after. But I loved your point about how AI has made this better for everybody. I think it's raised, as I think you were saying also, kind of the bar and expectations of quality of content, and what you used to be able to get away with, you really can't, because you're now competing. You should be competing at a higher level.
That's it. Yeah. And it's all exciting. I think that the custom GPT thing, again, it's not the problem is when you just use the model in general and get generic thought leadership. If you're plugging in custom content trained on GPTs for your spokespeople, which I'm a fan of, is creating GPTs for your CEO and others and training it on that, there's at least some human context in there. But what these newbie kind of not fully thinking this thing through agencies and leaders are doing are literally just going to ChatGPT cold and saying, what can I talk about for this topic, and trying to pitch that off as original. If you have any use of AI with personal context, brilliant, fantastic, do it all the time. But 100% AI, of course, we could slide through on that one for a while, but thankfully I think that lasted for about 6 months to a year, and now everyone agrees we can tell, and we need some human story or element to this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to think of AI as obviously like an intelligent collaborator in the work that we're doing. I've called it, and others have called it, like an intern or an entry level employee. But once you train it, I think it becomes more of, like I said, a collaborative partner. And so even today, I wanted something written that I just didn't have a vision for yet. And so I gave limited input, and I said, would you write this for me? And it was more of like an executive communication. It wasn't really a public communication, more internal communication. And I said, I want to communicate this. I'm not sure how. And it took its first stab, which is exactly what I needed to be like, nope, that's not the direction I wanted, right? So then I was able to pivot and give it additional input, and then still wanted to go down a path that wasn't the path I wanted. Even the final draft, I was like, all right, I'll just take it from here and go. But it captured a couple of the messaging that I wanted to get through. And it really helped me get through kind of a writer's block that I had, because I wasn't really comfortable saying what I was going to say. Not that it was bad news. It was just something that was a little bit uncharacteristic of my style of getting involved in something, if you will. And I just was trying to propose, maybe we should change directions on this, but I wasn't yet convinced that we should. So I was trying to make it kind of help me communicate in a way. And this is where I find it very helpful, is help me make this sound more collaborative, or help me make this sound more confident, even when in that moment I may not be confident about it. And the draft that we go with, probably not what I thought it would be and not what AI was finally recommending, but some hybrid version. And I don't know about you, but where I get stuck on that is the perfectionist in me, or I'm like, man, I've been going back and forth for 20 minutes. I probably could have done this in 10 had I not tried to involve AI. But I feel like 90% of the time, it's a better product when all is said and done.
Yes. I mean, we could do a whole episode on perfectionism and comms, because let me raise my hand as someone who suffers from that.
Same.
That's a big one. That's a big one. I always joke about, for being someone who's a perfectionist and likes to have control, this is the worst career of all time. You have zero control. And I mean, you can influence things, but a lot of it at the end of the day is outside your control. But AI, I actually did a talk for the PRSA and SF, went out there and did about basically the realities of AI and how this is the most exciting time for PR pros. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is the most exciting time, not from using off-the-shelf AI, but using that trained AI to improve your work. So it's helping you do more at scale, helping you come up with better ideas, vibe coding. Right. If you have any technical knowledge, the proof of concepts that you can develop to generate an idea, to revisualize data, to understand trends. And then, of course, AI search and editorial impact on that. It's another renaissance for PR pros. I know you've talked about that before too. So AI has really actually re-enthused me about this industry, because it was kind of going through some tough times 5 or so years ago. But I feel like the value is more agreed upon now. And the tooling is so strong if you use it with even a shred of uniqueness. And yeah, you're off to the races. So I'm pro AI, and company I work with too, content management system, Storyblock. Yep. We use AI just in the right way to help you get more power out of your content creation. So you just have to take that extra bit of time to understand that you can't just prompt and run. You've got to give it context and tweak.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. And, maybe we should start a perfectionism anonymous group among PR and communication practitioners. I know my mantra for much of this year, it started out with, massive action was kind of my theme for the year. About midway through, I started adopting perfectionism slows you down, because I wanted to have this massive action about my goals and priorities. But what I was finding myself was that I was getting distracted with the perfectionism, which was slowing me down. So, yeah. And we become what we think about the most. I'm a big believer in that. So always trying to kind of think of, okay, how can I move fast and break stuff along the way? And, the good news is I've got a team behind me, both administratively and for our clients, who can kind of fix some of the mess that I'm starting to create, or at least finish it off for me so I can move on to the next thing. So, yeah. Brandon, any closing thoughts to share today?
Yeah, I think just to summarize this point, right? Why is it so important? We have to go media first in the age of AI, right? There's no doubt about it. So if you thought you were media first, I'd say take a step back, look at what you're doing, and am I really media first, or do I just like to think I'm giving the media the priority they deserve? So that's my main takeaway: is consider all these different points and try to verify your status. Are you primarily there for your brand in terms of your communication style, or are you really trying to serve your audiences, which is going to ultimately be better for your brand anyways?
Brandon, as we're wrapping up, any particular resources that you're following that are helping you stay on top of what's happening with artificial intelligence?
Great question. I basically live on LinkedIn these days, and it's not hard to find the most authentic voices out there in those places. And I would say that's your source of what's actually happening. I find myself turning there beyond anything else, because I like the immediacy of it. I usually find out things before they're covered in other publications or educational materials. So if you're not making use of LinkedIn, I know that sounds crazy to say in 2025, 2026, it's time to follow the right people and curate your feed. It's going to be the most educational thing you can hope for free. So I'd encourage everyone to get in there and find these thought leaders that they can learn from.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brandon. I think you're exactly right, and that's where I'm learning a lot, and then learning from others, and opting into certain pieces of content based on what others are sharing and recommending. So that's a really good point. And so, speaking of LinkedIn, how do people get a hold of you and follow you on LinkedIn if they want to continue the conversation or stay in touch with the things you're sharing?
Yeah, easy to find on LinkedIn, just Brandon Watts from Storyblock. And try to post there every day, and love to just bounce ideas around and learn from everyone. So it's been a really fun experience prioritizing that platform. So would love to connect there.
Well, and speaking of, for full transparency, that's how you and I met, was just engaging in each other's content. And I like some of the things you've said, and we've gotten into some, kind of micro commenting on the platform as well. And I was like, let's just get him on the podcast. Let's talk more about this. So this has been exciting, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this today.
Yeah, love it. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, with that, this has been another episode of On Top of PR. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And speaking of, if you did enjoy this, would you take a moment to share this episode with a friend or colleague who you think would benefit from it? It's my pleasure and my privilege to help you stay on top of PR. And I think we've done exactly that today by throwing out kind of 5 ideas that you could really think of and share with your team to help elevate what you're doing in 2026. And so with that, this is Jason Mudd from Axia Public Relations signing off. I hope something great happens to you today. Be well.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.